Should be good to go, and it should be popping up now. I'm going live again, and this is Friday, September 17th, 2021, and I will be discussing Uber and Lyft, Rideshare, automobile accidents, and workers' compensation issues. Of course, Proposition 22 limits the legislature's power to include rideshare drivers as employees and make them part of the workers' compensation system. Basically require Lyft and Uber as employers because they're employing people in the state. Of course, whether or not someone's an employee is a legal distinction there. So it's employee versus independent contractor. So if someone's an independent contractor, they're not subject to the workers' compensation insurance requirements. So if I hire someone to do a job for me and I have no control over when they show up or how they really organize their work, and I don't make their hours, and it's something that I pay them $100 to do, like to fix a faucet in my backyard, that person would be considered a contractor. They're not an employee that shows up and earns a W-2 wage where there's employment taxes withheld. An Uber or Lyft driver works much like the independent contractor or handyman who comes to fix the faucet in your backyard. They work for just basically cash, and then they have to withhold their own employment taxes. And if they want workers' compensation insurance for themselves, they'd have to purchase their own policy and then have it on themselves. But they wouldn't have an employer that would cover them. The person who hired them would only have them maybe for the day, and then they'd have a new employer the next day, and that would be an independent contractor position or job. But someone who works for a company and has to show up at a certain time and has a boss, so to speak, that worker is under the workers' compensation safety net, which means the employer has to have workers' compensation insurance, and the workers' compensation insurance has to have certain benefits that it provides to that worker in the event they're injured on the job and sustain, a disability. Need for medical care, maybe for retraining, and an Uber or Lyft driver doesn't have that same benefit from Uber and Lyft. They have an independent contractor relationship where there is no benefit. There's no insurance benefit, or at least workers' compensation insurance benefit. Now, there is insurance that covers automobile collisions, but if an Uber driver causes the incident, so if the Uber driver causes the incident, then they're not going to have workers' compensation insurance, which would be a no-fault insurance that would provide them benefits if, there's no other insurance to help them. Like if they're at fault, then they can't claim on the other party. The other party's claiming on their insurance, on the Uber driver's insurance. So they don't have the ability to collect money to compensate themselves financially for their pain and suffering or their loss of earnings. Because workers' compensation doesn't provide pain and suffering, but it does provide it does provide wage replacement in the form of temporary disability payments and also some wage payments for lost earning capacity. So that's called permanent disability impairment, and that can come with a workers' compensation insurance policy. And as you're an Uber or Lyft driver, you just won't have access to that benefit at all. So Proposition 22 was passed, and it created an initiative statute that basically made Uber and Lyft drivers exempt from the test that the legislature enacted to make them employees. And there was a ruling recently in Alameda County by a trial court judge that the statute as written is unconstitutional because it extends too far into the legislature's ability to enact workers' compensation laws. And I won't get into the details of that constitutional argument on this channel or at least on this session. I'm more discussing if you're an injured Uber driver, you don't have workers' compensation benefits right now. Because even though the case found Proposition 22 unconstitutional, I believe it's probably stayed, and that's going to be heard by the Court of Appeal and then ultimately the Supreme Court of California. And so right now, Uber and Lyft drivers do not have workers' compensation insurance protection from Uber or Lyft. They would have to purchase their own insurance to cover them if they sustain an injury and have a disability while working. Now, there may be a situation where there's a way to recover if you're an Uber or Lyft driver and you don't cause the incident. If you're hit by someone while you're working, you have a lawsuit and an insurance claim against that driver. And if that driver doesn't have enough insurance to pay for a catastrophic injury, then you have the potential, you have uninsured motorist coverage through Uber or Lyft. You would seek a lawyer and have them help you make a claim. So if you've been injured in an automobile collision, if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, you do have access to insurance that you might not know you have access to if you're seriously injured while working for Uber or Lyft. It's not going to be workers' comp benefits right now, which other workers have access to. But there is insurance out there to be had if you're not at fault, or if the other party's uninsured and you're not able to collect anything from them. There's also insurance that protects you under Uber and Lyft. So today we're discussing rideshare insurance issues, no workers' compensation benefits for Uber and Lyft drivers right now in California, but there is uninsured motorist coverage in the event, because people who are driving, if you're driving Uber or Lyft and that's your job, then you're going to have a higher likelihood of being in an incident because you're driving more miles. So you have to be very careful. And if you are in an incident, you need to understand that it's something that you need to take seriously and probably consult with an attorney about before too much time goes by. All right. Well, so it's Friday and it's been an interesting week. Had some court appearances. All the court appearances are on telephonic. I had one appearance where I was like this in front of the judge in Orange County. It was a minors compromise hearing, and I'm helping a minor have their money set aside in a special account, which is where money goes that's awarded to minors in a settlement. It goes into a blocked account, or if the minor has a substantial sum and they're young, we look for a structured settlement or an annuity type situation. I wouldn't call it a structured settlement situation. I would say it's an annuity that's purchased at one time with a lump sum of money, and then it's paid out at a future date at a certain rate. So it's a way to preserve the settlement funds of a minor who's very young and has received a substantial sum of money related to an auto accident situation. And smaller amounts of money where a child's maybe 17, we might at this point wait until the minor turns 18 to process the funds through to avoid minors compromise, because the courts are going to take longer than 6 or 7 months to get the whole thing done right now. But generally speaking, the appropriate thing to do is to file paperwork with the court, see the judge, and have a guardian appointed and have that money be placed into a blocked account so that it's preserved for the minor when they turn 18. And if it's a substantial sum of money and it's going to be a substantial amount of time, then I do recommend the purchase of an annuity with an A+ rated company. I think there's tons of them out there that will allow a policy to be purchased and placed in your child's name, and then they're going to receive money in the future. So that's the appropriate thing to do. So those hearings are done visually, where the judge, looks at the lawyer and is able to observe the guardian and the child. And there's a little bit more to that than just a status conference or a case management conference that maybe there's some discovery discussed and that's it. So certainly Uber and Lyft drivers aren't minors, but maybe you're in an Uber or Lyft with your minor child and there's an automobile collision and you're just wondering, who covers me? Is it my insurance? Is it Uber's insurance? Well, it's maybe both your insurance could have some coverage. But most likely, if you're in the situation where you're in an Uber, of course, they're gonna cover your bodily injury in terms of an uninsured motorist situation. But maybe you're hit by someone else and that other party is not wanting to pay you and you need help from a lawyer. So maybe you need to consult with a lawyer to figure out what insurance is going to cover the situation, and you also need to consult with an attorney to make sure that that insurance does cover the situation. So it's more than just suing someone when you hire an attorney. You speak with the lawyer and the lawyer learns the facts of your claim, and then you have a discussion and some legal principles are applied to advance your interests, and that helps you. It helps you make better decisions. So then you go from the initial consultation probably to hiring the attorney, and then from there, the attorney's office keeps you up to date on the status of the legal portion, and the client keeps the lawyer's office up to date on the status of their treatment. Now, sometimes lawyers refer clients to treatment on a lien basis, and if you don't have health insurance and you need treatment now, then thank you, Roxana. Appreciate that. And you need treatment now, you will choose to maybe go to a doctor that's referred by your lawyer. Well, that doctor might communicate better with your lawyer than maybe your own primary care physician or the physical therapy that you're going through your own insurance, because that insurance doesn't really have, they're going to get paid from their insurance carrier, and the lawyer the doctor that's working on a lien is not able to get payment right away. They're working and holding off on billing, and that's the way lien-based treatment works. Is you go to a doctor and they put a lien on the money on your case. Now, if you're going to your own doctors and they're being paid through your insurance policy, your healthcare policy, that healthcare policy is going to also claim on the money that you ultimately collect on your lawsuit. So it's not that you can avoid having to pay doctors by just using your health insurance. So if you're coming into my office and you don't know whether or not lien-based treatment is better than using your own health insurance for your auto case, you shouldn't be thinking that you're going to get a better deal because you use your own, because that company will also want reimbursement from your settlement. And of course, my office, as a service to my clients, as part of the representation, takes your side and negotiates with your healthcare provider on the lien. And there is usually reductions that are made. But not all plans are very open to reductions. For example, like ERISA-funded health plans, they don't have to reduce. That's constitutional. There's constitutional authority that says that they can seek full reimbursement for any costs that the plan has incurred in relation to the automobile collision and your injuries. And that's because it's like an employer self-funded plan. The employer is actually putting their own money out of their own pocket to fund those services. And a lot of times those employers, they want that money back. They don't want to give it to the employee. So you need a lawyer who's on your side, who understands this and is able to discuss the case with the insurance adjuster for the healthcare plan on that level. And if you don't have that attorney on your side and you just hire some lawyer who you think is good for automobile cases, but you don't know for certain, then you're going to risk that maybe you're not going to get the best reduction that you would get. And at my office, we've done hundreds of these types of cases. So we understand how to negotiate. And of course, that leads to more successful outcomes for our clients. And that's important for minors as well. Ultimately, the court has to approve the minor's settlement. So if there is a plan that's wanting to have the entire amount, that's going to need to be explained to the judge. So minors have some more protection there than adults. But I digress. Let's get back to Uber and Lyft and uninsured motorist coverage, which is the topic of this live stream. So Well, I've done several dozen Uber and Lyft, uninsured motorist and third-party cases. Very interesting situations. I've had a wrongful death case, and that was a sad situation. Of course, it's never an easy thing to do a wrongful death case, especially when it's a younger family member who still has a lot of vitality and had a lot of vitality left. And of course, there are certain steps that need to be taken to make sure investigation is done on those types of cases. I'm working on a case right now involving the death of someone in a transportation vehicle. And there's a lot to uncover sometimes as to what was going on that caused that death. So if you've been involved in an accident, or you've had a family member who's been involved in an accident and has passed away, you need a lawyer who's going to be on that case looking at everything, or else certain things are going to potentially be missed, and you won't have the presentation to the insurance adjuster and ultimately to a jury that you need to make that case valuable to your family to reimburse, what you can from money, which of course it can't bring a family member back, but it can help a situation that has left you without a loved one. So that's why you seek legal action, and you do it sooner rather than later. There's a grieving process, and of course, hiring a lawyer is not always the number one thing on your mind, but you have to consider that if it's an Uber or Lyft case, that the evidence is not within your possession. It may be within the possession of the company that caused the death of your family member. So there has to be certain actions that are taken quickly if you've lost a family member in an Uber or Lyft accident. And of course, the police have to be communicated with. You have to communicate with Uber and Lyft, or Lyft, depending on the service that's being used. And you have to be on your game. So it's important to have a lawyer early, I think, for that very reason, and also to give you the peace of mind that those things are being done. And ultimately, if a lawsuit needs to be filed, then it's done with preparation, which is what you need to have a successful legal action. You can't just go in filing lawsuits without thinking. You have to put in and do your homework first, because as the plaintiff, you have more knowledge about your injuries and the situation that you're going to be alleging against the defendant than the defendant can maybe ever know. And when you're not in a lawsuit with the defendant, you don't have to share any information with them. And sometimes the information that you want from the defendant is the information that you think they're never going to give you. So prior to filing a lawsuit, during the investigation stage, that's where you're getting a lot of things that make your case valuable. So if you've lost a family member in an Uber or Lyft collision and you don't have the evidence in your hands, you need to contact an attorney so that that type of information can be dug up and it can be reviewed. Or if you've been injured in an Uber or Lyft collision, same thing. You need to make sure that you have a lawyer looking at what occurred so that you're not missing anything. And that's part of a free consultation sometimes. And of course, if you're injured due to the negligence of someone else, you're probably going to want a lawyer to present that insurance claim. Okay, well, Roxana's on. So that's a little bit about Uber and Lyft collisions and insurance issues related to them. Generally speaking, I don't know if there's more Uber or Lyfts out now than there were before. I know that the lockdowns are primarily, well, let's say that things seem to be getting back to some semblance of normal. Of course, the activity is still down in the state, I think significantly, which, that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's certainly been easier not to have to go to court and be driving to court, 3-4 times a week, being able to take care of it at my station here at my office where I'm sitting now and presenting to the court professionally like I'm doing here on my live stream. So you have to consider the lawyer that you're hiring. Are they professional? Are they coming to the courtroom looking good? telephonically because that's what you need right now. And that's what I do at Napolin Accident Injury Lawyer, is that I'm representing my client to the judge in a professional fashion, where I have a good presence via Zoom and court call. And yeah. Well, what other issues can I bring up here? I can maybe find this case. See if this will go up onto the stream. Okay. I think that we'll flip over here. Here is the actual court case. And you can find this, a link to this. I put this up on my Google Drive, and I put a link to it in the description below. You can click on the link, and the link will bring you to this court file. And the court file is order granting petition for writ of mandate. So the petitioner asks the court to stop Proposition 22 from being, say it's unconstitutional, from being put into effect. And of course, Proposition 22 is the state of the current situation, where Uber and Lyft drivers don't have workers' compensation insurance. We won't go into the specifics of this case on the channel, because that's not what we really do here at Napolin Accident Injury Lawyer. We don't present cases for you to look through. I wanted to give this to you as information, just for general knowledge, that Uber and Lyft drivers still don't have workers' compensation insurance. Okay. So we'll take a short break here. I'm going to just pause this and come back. Should be back now. Waiting for my delay to show up so I know that I'm going forward. Oh, I'm back. Okay. So, yeah, Uber and Lyft drivers not entitled to workers' compensation insurance, although that is still open for debate, because it's open for debate as to the constitutionality of the initiative to limit the legislature's ability to enact workers' compensation laws and define who falls under those laws. I'm not going to get into the constitutional arguments on this channel. I'm just saying that as of right now, you don't have workers' compensation insurance if you're an Uber or Lyft driver. So you're not entitled to those no-fault benefits that other workers receive in the event that they're injured while driving for work. But you drive for work all the time if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, so you're highly susceptible to being injured on the job. The workers' compensation premiums for Uber and Lyft drivers are probably going to be extremely high to extend no-fault benefits. So Uber and Lyft drivers have to deal with that right now if that's the way you make a living. You got to be careful on the roadway and buy uninsured motorist bodily coverage. Well, you have uninsured motorist coverage while you're transporting a passenger if you're an Uber driver or Lyft driver. But if you're just driving around and you haven't picked up a job yet, you have no protection. And while you're traveling to pick up someone, you don't have as much protection in terms of uninsured motorist coverage as you would have when you have someone as a passenger in your vehicle. And as soon as you end that trip and that passenger exits the vehicle, you're back down to a lower protection. So it's still important, if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, it's still important to obtain good automobile insurance to cover yourself in excess of what Uber or Lyft will cover for in the event you're injured through no fault of your own by someone who doesn't have enough insurance to pay for your serious injuries. And again, if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, ride sharing is a dangerous profession. Well, it's work. It's dangerous work to be a driver because it's so crazy out there in Southern California. Now it's been better because the pandemic has kept traffic down, but I think that it's coming back. I think that we're near back full again with activity. So if you're on the roadway and you're an Uber or Lyft driver, you're going to be subjected to the risks that driving on the road subjects you to. And that's drivers who are not driving prudently and maybe distracted, drinking, generally speaking, not driving well, tailgating, running red lights, those types of situations, you're going to encounter those types of situations. So if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, you have to protect yourself by purchasing uninsured motorist coverage. When you're not with a passenger, you don't have nearly enough protection in the event you're seriously injured. And there's no workers' compensation insurance benefits right now because Proposition 22 says you're not a worker for purposes of the workers' compensation statute. Now that's being debated in the courts right now, whether or not it's constitutional. It's certainly going to change the industry. I don't know what the industry will look like if there's workers' compensation for Uber, Lyft, and rideshare drivers because it's expensive and driving is dangerous. So it's going to be a high premium situation and it's going to take away some of the profit from Uber, Lyft, and the like. So that's ultimately a decision that has to be made above my pay grade in terms of, that's something that the Supreme Court's going to have to work out and make a decision on. So if you've been involved in an Uber or Lyft collision and you're looking for a lawyer who understands these issues and can help you, give my office a call, and I'd be happy to provide you with a free and confidential case evaluation. Okay, I'm going to sign off.